The Hindu Kush mountains loomed like ancient sentinels under the moonless Afghan sky. Commander James "Hawk" Hawkins moved silently through the narrow valley, his SEAL Team 7 spread in tactical formation around him. 6 years leading special operations had honed his instincts to a razor's edge, and right now, every instinct screamed danger. "Hawk, we've got thermal signatures ahead," whispered Petty Officer Jackson through the comm. "Compound is supposed to be minimal security." "Copy that," Hawkins responded, his grip tightening on his rifle. The mission was straightforward: extract a CIA asset from a Taliban-controlled village before sunrise. Intelligence had promised light resistance, maybe 5 fighters, but intelligence had been wrong before. The night exploded. The RPG's distinctive whoosh cut through the darkness a split second before the grenade hit. Hawkins threw himself sideways as the explosion tore through the air where he'd been standing. The blast wave picked him up like a rag doll and slammed him against a mud brick wall. His helmet cracked against stone. Stars burst across his vision. "Contact, contact," Lieutenant Chen's voice screamed through the radio. Machine gun fire erupted from 3 positions, a perfect L-shaped ambush. Tracer rounds cut through the darkness like angry hornets. This wasn't light resistance. This was a killing zone. Hawkins rolled to his knees, bringing his rifle up. Through the smoke and dust, he counted muzzle flashes. 10, 15, 20. His team of 6 was outnumbered 5-1. Another RPG streaked overhead, detonating against the compound wall behind them. "Fall back," Hawkins shouted into his radio, emptying his magazine at the nearest machine gun nest. "Chen, get them out. That's an order." "Not without you, Skipper," Chen's voice came back. A second explosion, closer this time. Hawkins felt the shrapnel before he heard the blast, white-hot metal tearing through his left shoulder, spinning him around. Blood soaked his uniform instantly. His rifle clattered from numb fingers. "Commander's hit," Rodriguez yelled. Through blurring vision, Hawkins saw his medic trying to reach him, but a wall of gunfire forced Rodriguez back. "Go," Hawkins roared, fighting to stay conscious. "Regroup and extract, I'll catch up." He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. The concussion was worse than he thought. Blood ran hot down his arm. Through the smoke, he saw his team retreating, Chen physically dragging Jackson, Rodriguez and Yates laying down covering fire. They thought he was right behind them. Rough hands grabbed Hawkins from behind. He spun, throwing an elbow that connected with something solid. A Taliban fighter grunted, but 2 more grabbed his arms. Hawkins fought, even injured, his SEAL training taking over. He got one hand free, reaching for his sidearm. The rifle butt came out of nowhere, catching him square in the temple. The world tilted sideways. Darkness swallowed him whole. The last thing Commander James Hawkins heard was his team's voices fading into the distance, and the sound of zip ties being pulled tight around his wrists. He was alone now, deep in enemy territory. And the real nightmare was just beginning. 300 meters above the Kunar Valley, Staff Sergeant Riley Morgan lay perfectly still among the rocks. She'd been in this position for 11 hours, barely breathing, her ghillie suit blending seamlessly with the mountain terrain. Most snipers couldn't handle the patience this job required. Riley thrived on it. Through her Schmidt and Bender scope, she watched the Taliban compound below. Her target, Commander Khalid Ahmadi, responsible for 17 IED attacks that had killed dozens of American soldiers, sat drinking tea with his lieutenants. One shot. That's all she needed. Just one clean shot and she could end months of hunting. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger. Wind, 3 knots from the east. Distance, 847 meters. Temperature dropping. She'd made harder shots than this. But something felt off. Unusual vehicle movement caught her attention. 3 trucks racing up the mountain road, kicking up dust trails visible even in the darkness. Taliban fighters didn't move with that kind of urgency unless something important was happening. Riley shifted her scope, tracking the lead vehicle. Her breath caught. Through the magnified optic, she saw them, 6 Taliban fighters dragging someone from the truck bed. The prisoner wore tactical gear, American-made, covered in blood and dust. His movements were sluggish, injured. They threw him to the ground, and even from this distance, Riley could see the defiance in how he tried to stand despite his wounds. "You've got to be kidding me," she whispered. This changed everything. Riley had been operating alone in these mountains for 6 weeks. They called her the Ghost because she could disappear into terrain like smoke, strike without warning, and vanish before anyone knew she'd been there. 43 confirmed kills, 3 Bronze Stars, and a reputation that made male snipers twice her size uncomfortable. She'd earned every bit of it. Growing up in Montana's foster system, Riley had learned early that nobody was coming to save her. Her foster father, a grizzled Vietnam veteran named Tom Morgan, had taught her to shoot when she was 12. "Most people wait for permission to be extraordinary," he'd told her. "Warriors make their own permission." At 18, she'd joined the Marines. At 22, she'd fought her way into Scout Sniper School, enduring instructors who wanted her to quit, proving herself on every range, every stalk, every test. She hadn't just passed, she'd excelled. Now, at 28, she was one of the most effective snipers in the United States military. And she was watching an American prisoner being dragged toward a compound known for execution videos. Riley's radio crackled softly. "Ghost, status report," her handler's voice requested. She keyed the mic. "Handler, this is Ghost. I have eyes on an American prisoner, military, critically injured. Taliban fighters moving him to Compound Alpha 7. Request immediate extraction authorization and QRF support." Static filled the silence. Then, "Ghost, stand by." Through her scope, Riley watched them throw the American into a small building. Guards posted at the door. She counted fighters, 18 now, more arriving. This wasn't just a holding facility. This was a high-value detention site. "Ghost, this is command." The voice was different now, higher authority. "Continue primary mission. Search and rescue is being coordinated through proper channels. Maintain observation on your original target. Do not repeat, do not engage. Acknowledge." Riley's jaw clenched. Proper channels meant paperwork, approval chains, political considerations. Proper channels meant this prisoner had maybe 24 hours before he appeared in an orange jumpsuit on jihadi websites. She'd seen those videos. She'd never forget them. "Ghost, acknowledge order," the voice repeated. Through her scope, she watched her original target, Commander Ahmadi, walk into the building where they'd taken the American prisoner. He was smiling. In his hand, he carried a video camera. Riley thought of Tom Morgan, of his weathered face and steady hands. Do what's right, even when it costs everything. Her finger moved away from the trigger. "Ghost, acknowledge." Riley reached down and switched off her radio. The Ghost was going dark. And she was going hunting. Riley Morgan stared at the silent radio for a full minute, knowing she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. Cutting communications with command during an active mission wasn't just insubordination, it was career suicide. Court-martial territory, dishonorable discharge, everything she'd fought for gone. But some things mattered more than a career. She shifted her scope back to the compound. Through a grimy window, she caught glimpses of movement. The American prisoner slumped against a wall. Commander Ahmadi circling him like a predator. 2 guards inside, 4 outside, more in the barracks building adjacent. Riley pulled out her tactical notebook, sketching the compound layout from memory. She'd been surveilling this area for weeks. Every building, every approach, every blind spot was already mapped in her mind. The compound sat in a shallow valley, surrounded by rocky terrain. 1 road in, 1 road out. Guard towers on the north and south corners. generator building on the east side. The smart play was to wait, let the official rescue operation handle it, go back to her mission. But Riley had learned long ago that smart and right weren't always the same thing. She checked her gear: M4 rifle with suppressor, M110 sniper rifle, 200 rounds of ammunition, 4 fragmentation grenades, her Kabar knife, night vision goggles, medical kit, water for maybe 36 hours, no backup, no extraction plan, no support. Just her. The odds were mathematically insane. 18 fighters minimum, possibly more in the barracks. She was one person attempting a hostage rescue that would normally require a full platoon. Every tactical manual ever written said this was impossible. Riley had never been very good at following manuals. She began calculating. The compound's weakness was its routine. Taliban fighters, despite their combat experience, fell into patterns. She'd watched them for weeks. Guard change happened every 4 hours. The next change, 300 hours in approximately 6 hours. During the changeover, there was a 12-minute window where positions were undermanned while fighters gathered for prayer. 12 minutes to infiltrate, locate the prisoner, and begin extraction. It wasn't much, but it was something. Riley pulled out a protein bar, forcing herself to eat. Her foster father's voice echoed in her memory. Fear is just your body preparing for action. Use it. Don't let it use you. She wasn't afraid of dying. She'd made peace with that possibility the day she'd earned her Scout sniper qualification. Death was an occupational hazard. What terrified her was the thought of watching another American die when she could have done something about it. Through her scope, she saw Ahmadi exit the building, wiping blood from his hands. The interrogation had begun. Riley checked her watch: 47 hours. 5 hours until the guard change. 5 hours to plan every step, visualize every movement, prepare for every contingency. She pulled her ghillie suit tighter and began her mental preparation, the same ritual she performed before every mission: breathing exercises, visualization, muscle memory rehearsal. Tom Morgan had taught her that success wasn't about being fearless. It was about being disciplined enough to act despite the fear. At 100 hours, Riley would begin her approach. 2 hours to cover 300 meters of open ground without being detected. Another hour to position herself at the compound perimeter. At 300 hours, when the guards changed shift, she would strike. 1 Marine, 18 Taliban fighters, 1 American prisoner who didn't even know rescue was coming. The ghost smiled grimly in the darkness. They'd trained her to be invisible, to kill from a distance, to operate alone behind enemy lines. Tonight, she'd show them exactly how well that training had taken. Riley began breaking down her sniper rifle, packing it carefully. For this mission, she'd need to be mobile, fast, and close. The M4 would be her primary weapon. She took one last look at Commander Ahmadi through her binoculars. Soon, she promised silently. Soon, you'll learn what happens when you take one of ours. The ghost began her descent down the mountain, moving toward the valley below. Toward the impossible. Toward redemption. Pain dragged Commander James Hawkins back to consciousness. His shoulder throbbed where shrapnel had torn through muscle and tendon. Blood had dried crusty on his face, his left eye swollen nearly shut. The zip ties around his wrists had cut deep enough to draw blood. The room was barely 6 feet square. Concrete walls, a single bulb hanging from exposed wiring, no windows, a metal door with a viewing slot. Hawkins had been in enough SEER training to recognize a professional interrogation cell when he saw one. He tested his restraints carefully, keeping his breathing steady despite the pain. The zip ties were industrial grade, pulled tight enough to cut circulation. His hands were already going numb, but SEAL training had taught him tricks: dislocate your thumb, compress your hand, exploit any weakness. The door crashed open. Commander Khalid Ahmadi entered, flanked by two fighters carrying AK-47s. Amadi was younger than Hawkins expected, maybe 35, educated, his English nearly perfect. That made him more dangerous, not less. "Commander Hawkins," Amadi said, consulting a notepad. "SEAL Team 7, 6 years in special operations. A wife named Sarah in Virginia Beach. 2 children, Michael, age 7, and Emma, age 4. Ice flooded Hawkins's veins. They'd identified him, knew his family. "We found your identification, of course," Amadi continued, pulling up a metal chair and sitting backwards on it. "Along with some very interesting tactical equipment, night vision, encrypted communications. You were here for something important, yes?" Hawkins said nothing, his jaw set. Amadi nodded to one of the guards. The rifle butt caught Hawkins in his injured shoulder. White-hot agony exploded through his body. He couldn't stop the grunt of pain that escaped. "Where is your team?" Amadi asked calmly. "How many Americans are operating in this province? What were your mission objectives?" "James Hawkins, Commander, U.S. Navy," Hawkins recited through gritted teeth. "Service number." Another blow, this time to his ribs. Something cracked. Definitely broken ribs now. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way," Amadi said, lighting a cigarette. "I have all night. Do you?" Hawkins forced himself to breathe through the pain to find his center. SEER training had prepared him for this. Resist, survive, escape. The 3 pillars of captivity survival. Through his swollen eye, he studied the room. The door opened inward. 2 guards, both carrying rifles but standing too close together, amateur mistake. The light bulb was within jumping reach if he could get his hands free. The chair Amadi sat on was metal, heavy enough to be a weapon. "Nothing to say," Amadi stood, grinding his cigarette out on the concrete floor. "Perhaps you need time to consider your situation. You're 40 kilometers from the nearest American base. Your team abandoned you. No one is coming for you, Commander." The door slammed shut. Locks clicked into place. Alone again, Hawkins let out a shaky breath. His ribs screamed with every inhalation. His shoulder felt like someone had driven a railroad spike through it. But pain was just information. He could work through information. He began working his injured shoulder against the wall, methodically testing the range of motion. The joint wasn't completely destroyed, painful but functional. If he could get his hands in front of him instead of behind, he'd have options. Meanwhile, 200 kilometers away at Forward Operating Base Chapman, Lieutenant Marcus Chen stood before his commanding officer, barely containing his rage. "What do you mean we're not launching immediate rescue?" Chen demanded, his hands clenched into fists. "Commander Hawkins is alive. We have his last known coordinates. Every minute we wait." "Stand down, Lieutenant," Colonel Morrison interrupted. "The situation is complicated. Pakistani border issues, political clearances, asset positioning. We launch a half-planned rescue, we could start an international incident." "With all due respect, sir, screw the politics. That's our commander out there." Morrison's face hardened. "You're dismissed, Lieutenant. That's an order." Chen saluted sharply and left the command tent, his jaw working. Outside, Petty Officers Jackson, Rodriguez, and Yates waited in the darkness. "Well?" Jackson asked. "They're not going," Chen said flatly. "Not yet, maybe not for days." The 4 SEALs looked at each other. In that moment, without speaking a word, they all understood what came next. "I know a guy who can get us a vehicle," Rodriguez said quietly. "No questions asked." "I'm in," Yates said immediately. Jackson nodded. "Hawk would come for any of us, we all know it." Chen looked at his teammates, brothers who'd fought beside him through hell and back. What they were contemplating was career-ending, possibly criminal. Disobeying direct orders, going AWOL, conducting an unauthorized combat operation. 200 hours, Chen said. "Bring everything we've got. We're bringing our skipper home. At precisely 300 hours, Riley Morgan moved like death incarnate through the compound's outer perimeter. She covered 300 meters in 2 hours, crawling through rocks and sand, every movement calculated, every breath controlled. Now she was inside the wire. The first guard never saw her coming. Riley's suppressed M4 whispered twice, double-tapped to the chest. The man collapsed silently into the shadows. She caught his body, lowering it gently behind a stack of supply crates. North Tower, check. A voice crackled over the Taliban radio frequency. Riley keyed the fallen guard's radio, grunting an affirmative in Pashto. She'd spent 6 weeks listening to their communications, learning their patterns, their language, their protocols. The guard tower was next, 400 meters uphill angle through her M110 scope. The sentry was smoking, silhouetted perfectly against the compound lights. Riley's breathing slowed. Heart rate dropped. The world narrowed to the crosshairs and the target. One shot. The suppressor muffled the crack to a dull thump. The sentry jerked once and crumpled. Riley was already moving, flowing through shadows like water. 2 more guards at the main building entrance. She dropped them both before either could raise an alarm. Her magazine was half empty now. She reloaded smoothly, muscle memory from 10,000 repetitions. The building's interior was dim, lit by occasional bulbs. Riley cleared each room systematically, left, right, center, flowing through doorways with her rifle leading. Empty, empty, storage room, empty. Then she heard it, labored breathing behind a locked metal door. Riley tried the handle. Locked. She pulled a small charge from her vest, placed it carefully on the hinges. 3 seconds later, a muffled pop and the door sagged inward. Inside, a man hung from zip ties, blood-soaked and beaten. But his eyes, those eyes were alert, calculating, dangerous even in captivity. U.S. Marine, Riley whispered, moving forward and cutting his restraints with her knife. We're leaving now. Commander James Hawkins stared at her like she was a mirage. Who the hell? Questions later, can you move? Hawkins tested his legs, nodding despite obvious pain. Give me a weapon. Riley handed him her sidearm, a Sig Sauer P226. Stay close, follow my lead. That's when the alarm screamed to life. Red lights flooded the corridors. Doors burst open. Taliban fighters poured out of the barracks, at least a dozen, rifles raised and shouting. So much for stealth, Riley muttered, switching her M4 to full auto. The hallway erupted in gunfire. Riley and Hawkins moved in perfect synchronization despite never having trained together. She went left, he went right, their fields of fire overlapping, covering each other's blind spots. Bullets sparked off concrete walls. A fighter rounded the corner and Hawkins dropped him with 2 rounds center mass. Exits this way, Riley shouted, throwing a fragmentation grenade down the corridor. The explosion bought them precious seconds. They burst through a side door into the compound yard. Immediately, searchlights locked onto them. A pickup truck with a mounted machine gun, roared to life, the weapon swiveling toward them. DOWN. Riley tackled Hawkins as the machine gun opened up, .50 caliber rounds chewing through the wall where they'd been standing. They scrambled behind a concrete barrier. Hawkins was breathing hard, blood seeping through his uniform. Riley's left arm burned. She looked down to see blood spreading through her sleeve. She'd been hit and hadn't even felt it. We're pinned, Hawkins said, assessing their situation with professional calm despite the chaos. At least 15 hostiles, more coming. 1 exit covered by that machine gun. Ideas. Riley checked her ammunition. 2 magazines left, 1 grenade, against impossible odds. Then from the ridgeline above the compound, a single rifle shot cracked through the night. The machine gunner's head snapped back, and he collapsed into the truck bed. More shots followed, precision fire, systematic, devastating. Taliban fighters dropped one after another, someone providing overwatch from the high ground. What the Hawkins started. 4 figures emerged from the darkness, rifles blazing, moving in tactical formation Riley recognized instantly. SEALs. They advanced on the compound like avenging angels, their suppressive fire forcing the Taliban to take cover. "Hawk," a voice shouted, "we're coming in." Lieutenant Chen and 3 more SEALs burst through the compound gate, their weapons barking controlled bursts. They moved like a well-oiled machine, covering and maneuvering, driving toward Riley and Hawkins's position. "About damn time, Chen," Hawkins shouted back, a grin breaking through his bloody face. "You didn't think we'd leave you, did you, Skipper?" The combined force, Riley, Hawkins, and 4 SEALs, fought their way out of the compound in a controlled chaos of muzzle flashes and shouted commands. Chen's team had brought extra ammunition, medical supplies, and most importantly, hope. "Rodriguez, get the skipper patched up," Chen ordered as they took cover behind a stone wall outside the compound. "Jackson, Yates, secure our 6. Petty Officer Rodriguez, the team medic, immediately went to work on Hawkins's shoulder while bullets cracked overhead. "Sir, you look like hell." "Feel worse," Hawkins grunted, "but I'll live. Check her first." He nodded toward Riley, whose left arm was dark with blood. Rodriguez glanced at Riley's wound, a through-and-through in her bicep. "Clean hit. You're lucky, Marine." "Lucky," Riley repeated dryly, wincing as Rodriguez applied a pressure bandage. "That's one word for it." "We've got movement," Yates called out. "At least 20 fighters regrouping. They're going to flank us from the east." Chen checked his GPS. "We're 30 kilometers from the nearest friendly position. No vehicles, limited ammo, 2 wounded. This is going to be a hell of a walk." "Then we better start walking," Hawkins said, struggling to his feet. Despite his injuries, his command presence immediately reasserted itself. "Chen, you take point with Jackson. Riley, you know this terrain better than anyone, you're our scout. Rodriguez stays with me. Yates, your rear security." Nobody questioned the order. Even Chen, who'd led this unauthorized rescue, naturally deferred to his commander. They moved out into the darkness, leaving the burning compound behind. Taliban fighters swarmed after them like angry hornets, their voices carrying across the rocky terrain. Riley led them through paths she'd memorized over weeks of surveillance, dry riverbeds that provided cover, ridgelines that offered tactical advantage, valleys that avoided known Taliban positions. Every 100 meters she'd stop, scanning ahead with her night vision, then signal the all clear. "How long have you been operating alone out here?" Jackson asked during a brief halt, his respect evident. 6 weeks, Riley answered, not taking her eyes off the terrain ahead. 6 weeks solo, that's insane. That's the job. An hour into their movement, Taliban trucks appeared on the road parallel to their position. Searchlights swept the darkness, hunting them. "They're cutting us off," Chen observed grimly. "They know where we're headed." Riley studied the terrain, then pointed to a narrow canyon to the north. "There. It'll add 5 kilometers, but they can't follow with vehicles. We go on foot through the high ground." "That's rough terrain," Rodriguez said, looking at Hawkins's injuries. "I can make it," Hawkins insisted. "Let's move." They climbed into the rocky canyon, boots sliding on loose scree. Behind them, muzzle flashes lit up the darkness as Taliban fighters tried to follow on foot. Riley dropped back, finding a sniper position among the rocks. Through her scope, she counted 8 fighters climbing after them. She squeezed the trigger methodically. 1, 2, 3 targets down. The others scattered, buying the team precious minutes. "Ghost, let's go," Chen called. Riley abandoned her position and caught up to the group. They pushed deeper into the canyon, lungs burning, muscles screaming. Hawkins stumbled and Rodriguez caught him. "I'm good," Hawkins said, but his face was gray with pain and blood loss. 2 hours later, dawn began creeping over the eastern mountains. The darkness that had been their protection was fading. "We're not going to make it before sunrise," Yates said, voicing what everyone was thinking. Riley checked her map, then pointed to a cluster of caves halfway up a cliff face. There, we hole up, wait for dark again. They'll surround us, Jackson protested. They'll try, Riley said, but that position is defensible, better than being caught in the open at daylight. Chen looked at Hawkins, who nodded. The Marine's right, we fort up and hold. They reached the caves just as the sun broke the horizon. From their elevated position, they could see Taliban vehicles converging on the area, at least 30 fighters, maybe more. Rodriguez checked their ammunition. We've got maybe 200 rounds total. That's not going to last long if they rush us. Taliban surrounded the caves by mid-morning. Riley counted at least 40 fighters taking positions in the rocks below, cutting off every escape route. They were trapped. This is handler 6 to any U.S. forces in grid November 7-3. Chen's radio crackled suddenly. We have Apache gunships inbound to your position. Mark your location with infrared strobe. Chen's eyes widened. They found us. No, Hawkins said quietly, looking at Riley. She never turned her radio back on. They've been tracking her beacon this whole time. Riley pulled out her emergency beacon, realizing it had been transmitting their position for hours. The same command that had ordered her to stand down had been following her every move. Two Ah-64 Apache helicopters screamed over the ridgeline, their 30 cannons tearing into Taliban positions. The enemy fighters scattered, running for their vehicles. Within minutes, a Marine CH-53C Stallion helicopter touched down in a storm of dust and rotor wash. Let's go, the crew chief shouted. They scrambled aboard, Hawkins practically carried by Rodriguez and Chen. As the helicopter lifted off, Riley watched the cave system fall away below. They'd survived. Against impossible odds, they'd actually survived. But looking at the grim faces of the Marine aircrew, Riley knew the hardest battle was still ahead. 12 hours later, at Bagram Airfield, Riley stood at attention before Colonel Sarah Morrison and a panel of senior officers. Her arm was properly bandaged now, but she could feel her career bleeding out with every passing second. Staff Sergeant Morgan, Morrison began, her voice ice cold. You deliberately disobeyed direct orders, abandoned your assigned mission, went dark on communications, and conducted an unauthorized combat operation. Do you have anything to say for yourself? No excuse, ma'am, Riley said crisply. Your actions allowed a high-value target, Commander Ahmadi, to escape. 3 months of intelligence work wasted. Yes, ma'am. You also saved the life of a Navy SEAL commander and provided critical intelligence that led to the destruction of a major Taliban detention facility. Riley blinked, surprised by the shift in tone. Morrison leaned forward. I don't know whether to court-martial you or pin a medal on you, Sergeant. The door burst open. Commander Hawkins entered, his arm in a sling, flanked by a Navy captain. Colonel Morrison, permission to address the board. Morrison looked annoyed. Commander, you should be in medical. With respect, ma'am, this Marine saved my life. Hawkins placed a folder on the table. I've submitted an official commendation for Staff Sergeant Morgan for the Navy Cross. Lieutenant Chen and his team have corroborated every detail. Commander Hawkins, your men went AWOL. To save my life, ma'am, and they succeeded because of Sergeant Morgan's actions. Hawkins's voice carried the absolute conviction of someone who'd stared death in the face. She had no support, no backup, no authorization. She had a choice between following orders and doing what was right. She chose right. Morrison studied them both for a long moment. This is highly irregular. War usually is, Colonel. The panel deliberated for 2 hours. Riley stood outside the room with Chen and his team, all of them facing their own reckonings. Chen and his men had already been informed, non-judicial punishment, reduction in rank but no court-martial. "Whatever happens," Chen said quietly to Riley, "what you did out there, that was the most badass thing I've ever seen." Finally, the door opened. "Staff Sergeant Morgan," Morrison said, "you're being recommended for the Navy Cross. You're also being placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation." 6 months later, the California sun blazed over Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Staff Sergeant Riley Morgan stood in dress blues she'd only worn twice before, feeling more exposed than she'd ever felt on any battlefield. The ceremony drew hundreds: SEALs, Marines, officers, press, and families. Riley's hands trembled slightly as she stood at attention. She'd faced down 40 Taliban fighters without flinching, but this terrified her. Commander Hawkins, fully recovered and back in command of SEAL Team 7, stepped forward with the Navy Cross, the second highest military decoration for valor, the first ever awarded to a female Marine sniper. Staff Sergeant Riley Morgan, the citation read, "for extraordinary heroism while serving as a scout sniper in Afghanistan. With complete disregard for her own safety, and in the face of overwhelming enemy forces, Sergeant Morgan single-handedly infiltrated a fortified Taliban compound, rescued a captured American officer, and fought through superior numbers to ensure his survival. Her actions exemplify the finest traditions of military service." As Hawkins pinned the medal to her chest, he whispered, "Thank you for not following orders, Ghost." Riley's throat tightened. "Thank you for being worth saving, sir." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, but Riley's eyes found Lieutenant Chen and his team standing in formation. They wore their medals too, bronze stars with valor, alongside their demotion stripes. The Marine Corps and Navy had found a Solomon solution: punish the violation, honor the courage. After the ceremony, away from the cameras, the group gathered privately: Riley, Hawkins, Chen, Jackson, Rodriguez, and Yates. "So what now, Ghost?" Jackson asked. "You're famous, book deals, interviews, the whole 9 yards." Riley smiled slightly. "I've got orders, back to Afghanistan. Turns out the Corps still needs snipers, even insubordinate ones." "They'd be idiots to waste you on a desk," Chen said. Hawkins raised a glass. "To the team, and to doing what's right even when it costs everything." They drank together, and in that moment, Riley felt something she'd never experienced before. She'd spent her entire life alone, in foster homes, in the wilderness, on missions. She'd become the Ghost because isolation was her strength. But these men had risked everything for their commander, and she'd risked everything for a stranger. Together, they'd forged something stronger than orders or regulations. They'd forged brotherhood. Weeks later, at the Marine Scout Sniper School in Quantico, a new class of recruits filed past the hallway of legends, photos of the greatest snipers in Marine Corps history. The instructors had added a new photo. Staff Sergeant Riley Morgan in full ghillie suit, her rifle beside her, the Navy Cross visible on her dress uniform in the corner insert. The caption read, "The Ghost of the Hindu Kush, 43 confirmed kills, Navy Cross recipient, first female Marine Scout sniper to receive nation's second highest honor." A young female recruit stopped, staring at the photo. She joined the Marines because everyone said women couldn't be snipers, couldn't handle the physical demands, couldn't make the impossible shots. Riley Morgan proved them wrong. The instructor noticed the recruit starring. "That's Staff Sergeant Morgan. She's deployed right now, still hunting." "Will I ever be that good, Sergeant?" The instructor smiled. "That depends. You willing to do what's right even when everyone tells you it's wrong? Willing to stand alone if that's what it takes? Willing to sacrifice everything for what you believe in?" The recruit nodded firmly. "Then maybe, just maybe." Halfway around the world in the mountains of Afghanistan, Riley Morgan lay among the rocks in a ghillie suit, watching a Taliban compound through her scope. She'd been in position for 14 hours. Her target would appear soon. But this time she wasn't alone. 200 meters to her left, a SEAL sniper team provided overwatch. Behind her, a quick reaction force stood ready. The ghost had taught them that sometimes the lone wolf gets the job done, but the pack ensures everyone comes home. Her radio crackled. "Ghost, this is Overwatch, target acquired." Riley adjusted her scope. Distance 923 meters, wind 4 knots, temperature steady. She thought of Tom Morgan, who taught her to shoot, of the young girls who'd see her photo and dare to dream bigger, of Hawkins, Chen, and the team who'd shown her that strength wasn't just about being alone. Riley's breathing slowed, her heartbeat steadied. She squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed across the valley. Another mission, another day, another chance to prove that legends aren't born, they're forged in the moments when ordinary people make extraordinary choices. The ghost smiled in the darkness and prepared for the next shot. The end.